Recently, I've been thinking a lot about disability in superhero genres and just genres that tend to be power fantasies for absolutely no reason. And on a completely unrelated note, Disney failed to meet the demands of the BDS movement, and I feel like we now is not the time to stop the boycott. In fact, that just means we need to be boycotting harder. So, if you haven't already canceled your Disney Plus subscription, you should do that, and you definitely shouldn't restart it to watch any new shows. You shouldn't be going to the theater. You shouldn't be talking about any new things that Disney is producing, buying official merchandise, anything like that, giving it free promotion. You know what I mean? Like buy unlicensed merchandise if you'd like, I guess. Whether or not comics count as merchandise, I don't know yet. Anyway, I've been thinking about disability in power fantasies because one of my friends asked me to recommend some DC characters that are disabled. And other than like Barbara Gordon for like a few decades, I couldn't think of any that were meaningfully disabled. And I asked people like, what do you guys think? And I got a lot of responses that were characters that are technically disabled but not meaningfully disabled. And that's not a distinction you can make in real life, by the way. There is no like level of assistive device where someone is no longer disabled in real life. There's this tendency in power fantasies, typically written by able people, to make disabled characters superpowered in a way that negates their disability. Like, the best example of this happening, the easiest way to explain it, is Daredevil comics for the most part. Don't buy any of these, by the way. But like there's in like the Lee run, there's a scene where Daredevil flies an airplane. There's no way right now for a blind person, a fully blind person, to fly an airplane. Hell, even people with my vision level aren't allowed in the Air Force. Like to some extent, I'm sure there are blind people who want to fly airplanes, but like they might find something really powerful about a character that has the same disability as them being able to do that. But at the same time, if they are able to do that, are you really able to relate to them? If like Daredevil is blind in everything but name, do blind people really feel represented by him? I think the only writer that has managed to find this balance is Mark Waid, where like he makes sure to include in Matt Murdock's everyday life actual disability, where he has to like actually use braille. Like there are times when people like show him something that he needs to read and he can't read it because he's blind. People will scam him and he knows that they're lying to him because he can hear them, but like he can't see the money they're handing him, so he has no idea if he's actually getting the correct change. Like there's a lot of examples like this, and like Matt is still able to do a lot of things like punch, kick, run, and like a blind person can do those things with like assistance, and even without assistance, just with the right skills for moving across the world. But like I think that's good representation of how like you can make a character still superpowered and still disabled. And I think like Toph from Avatar: The Last Airbender walks this line well, but often does fall into like more classic Daredevil, where she is blind. Yes, like there are a lot of gags that are on the people around her and not on her, where they'll like show her something to read and she's like, what part of not, like being blind do you not get? And it's very funny. But like Toph, through her like earthbending sense, oftentimes it doesn't feel blind to the reader, and like I don't know, like it's an interesting balance you have to do. In my opinion, I think that we need more disabled characters in power fantasies who have powers that aren't related to their like disability in any way. Like so many blind characters have a like some sort of sense that like makes it so that they're not that blind. Like that's weird. A lot of characters that are physically disabled will get superpowers or some sort of fantastical prosthetic that functions the same way as having like just an abled body. Like I think a lot of like with Cyborg, like a lot of his prosthetics function the same way as like just a regular human hand, and it really is for the aesthetics. I think like a good example of this is Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood, where Eric like has to replace his like prosthetics because he's growing. Like they will shrink in the cold, or there's times he can't use them because of the weather or because like people are actually manipulating them. That's like an interesting use of like fantastical prosthetics. Like he still does have a better range of motion than like a traditional prosthetic that we currently have access to, but he's still disabled. I don't know. Comics, it's so hard to recommend disabled characters because sometimes, like in the case of Daredevil, they're not actually disabled that often, and like there's only one run that's really good about it. Or characters like Barbara Gordon, where she was disabled for like about 15 years in comics, maybe a little bit longer, but then like she's back to being able-bodied now, and that kind of leaves a sour taste in your mouth. And like there were a lot of examples of that people gave me, like Jericho from the Teen Titans, where like yes, he is mute, but now he's not currently. Same with like Roy Harper. Like, did he lose his arm? A lot of people forget about that. Like, it's this weird thing where because comics are this ever growing medium, a lot of writers will just like get rid of the disability, and that sucks. And I think like the solution to that is just you gotta stop like having ableist writers. It's oh god. I don't know. I want a blind superhero whose like power is super strength, but they still have to use a cane. I want a physically disabled superhero whose powers are like telekinesis. Wait, that's just Professor X. He's not even disabled anymore in the comics. Isn't that nuts? I truly think that Sun Spider is the best disabled representation we have in superhero comics because she's disabled and her disability actually helps her be a better spider person. Like the flexibility and like hyperextension that comes from her disability like actually really helps her in fights. Sad we don't see more of her. Sad that Marvel's also a piece of shit company. I really just made this video to like passively aggressive people to not talk about the new Daredevil show. Like, come on, guys.